Well, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thank you. Let's have like our own rally feel. Good evening. Good evening. My name is John Weinstein. I have the incredible honor of being the provost and vice president here at Bard Academy and Bard College at Simon's Rock, and I'm so excited to welcome you both in the room and in the Zoomosphere to the third annual Founders Day lecture. I believe this is the fifth time we've been officially recognizing Founders Day, which honors our founder, Elizabeth Blodgett Hall, or Betty Hall. This year she will be 115, so because she's still with us in spirit. And while her actual birthday is on November 16th, that's like on a Saturday this year. It's also the day of our Think Food conference, so I hope that people will come to that. So we're celebrating Betty a little early and having a bit of a longer season here on November 7th. So I am going to be handing it over to my wonderful podcast co-host and head of the Bard Career Leadership Project and faculty member here, Dr. Carla Stevens, who will introduce our speaker. One thing I do want to sort of add, I've taught in college, been a college leader, I've been a high school teacher and high school principal. I've thought about, they always tell high school principals, someday you're going to be an elementary school teacher or elementary principal, and I was like, well, that could be kind of interesting. But I said, but I can never do middle school, that's way too scary, and I'm not brave enough. Our speaker tonight was a middle school teacher, so don't mess with her. But before that, I will hand it over to someone else not to mess with, Dr. Carla Stevens.
As you may know, my wife was actually a middle school principal.
And I don't mess with her.
And we don't mess with her. So, as John has said, I'm Dr. Carla Stevens. I'm the director of the Bard Career Leadership Project and faculty in social studies here. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce our third annual Founders Day keynote speaker. Representative Becca Balint's congressional biography begins with the statement, Representative Becca Balint is a mom, teacher, and progressive leader. And it ends with, she is married to noted attorney and opera singer Elizabeth Lowell. Together they have 2 children, Abe 15 and Sarah 12, and an adorable dog named Wheelie. While I'm going to read more about Becca's professional accomplishments, I want us to keep in mind the leadership roles that she clearly prioritizes. Becca Balint is the first woman and openly LGBTQIA+ person to represent her home state of Vermont in the U.S. Congress. She received her BA from Smith College, graduating magna cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa. Becca earned her master's in education from Harvard University and an MA in history, from the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. A deep sense of justice, empathy, and service has guided Becca's career from the beginning, first as an educator who taught middle school for 14 years, then as an activist and state senator, and ultimately as the president pro tempore in 2021. While majority leader in the Vermont State Senate, Becca led the passage of the first gun safety laws in the state's history, aimed at keeping Vermont children, communities, and survivors of abuse safe. Becca also worked tirelessly in the state Senate to secure the largest housing investment in Vermont in decades to rebuild housing stock and expand middle-income housing. This Congress, Becca serves as Congressional Progressive Caucus Vice Chair for new members and as a co-chair of the Congressional Equality Caucus. In this latter role, Becca is a co-sponsor of the Equality Act, legislation that would expand federal civil rights protections to LGBTQIA+ Americans. She's also spoken out against anti-trans legislation. In 2023, she introduced legislation promoting education that includes LGBTQIA+ and women's history. She introduced a Mental Health in Schools Act and supports Green New Deal to combat the climate crisis. She is also a member of the Congressional Pro-Choice Caucus, the House Judiciary Committee, and the Budget Committee. So, undoubtedly, founder Betty Blodgett Hall would be pleased to have Representative Becca Balint, an educator and defender of democracy, as the keynote for the celebration of the 115th anniversary of her birth. Welcome, Representative Balint.
Thank you so much. Good evening. I'm very, very excited to be with you tonight. I'm grateful for the invitation. I just want to acknowledge up front that it's been a rough few days, I think, for everybody. And the presidential election certainly didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. And my party didn't have a great night. So I just want to start with that. But we're not going to spend the evening there, because there's so many other things that I want to talk about with you. So there's a lot to unpack there about what happened. But I do want to say that in speaking with members of my community, the LGBTQ community, with friends of mine who are people of color, with staff members of mine who are people of color, who are the children of undocumented Americans, that there's a lot of fear and anxiety about the future. And I feel that too. And I just want to assure you all that there are good people right now in Congress who are going to do everything that we can to make sure we are protecting the lives of all Americans. Absolutely. And as I said to so many of my constituents in the lead up to the election, they would say, well, what's going to happen if Harris doesn't win? And I said, well, the work is the same, whether she wins or whether she loses, because the work is about making this country worthy of its spoken ideals, and we're going to continue to do that, okay? So instead of focusing on that darkness, I really want to talk about something that drives me in my life, and is something I try to talk about a lot with young people whenever I have a chance, and that is about what I have figured out about authentic leadership. What it feels like, how it operates, how it functions in groups, what the research has shown us about how we are able to move people into action. And so I thought I would spend most of the evening really talking about those things and how you each, whether you're in elected office or not, you also are a leader in your sphere of influence. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about me and my journey to Congress. It's very funny always to see my official picture up here, because I never imagined I'd be there. I'm the child of an immigrant and a working class mom, and I never imagined that I would be there. And I always put that at the top, because maybe some of you are thinking, maybe that's a path that you want to follow, but you just don't know how to get there. I'm going to talk with that, talk to you about that. So I'm Becca Balint. I am the first woman ever to represent Vermont in Congress. And it took a long time. Also, the first openly queer person to represent Vermont in Congress. And this past Tuesday, while we were looking at some of the difficult returns at the presidential election, I was reelected. And that was, for me, an important night, because it was a real vindication for me of everything that I knew that was true about leadership, that I was told I couldn't do it my way. My slogan on my first campaign was courage and kindness. And people told me that was not a winning strategy, that I had to talk about fighting all the time. And I said, I actually think what people want is an authentic leader who shows up with empathy and compassion. And to be reelected was so gratifying to me, because every step of the way I have lived those values to the best of my ability. So, over the past decade, I have given a lot of thought to my own political journey and I wanted to sort of unpack it for you so that you could understand that sometimes you have to take a bunch of steps before you become the leader that you want to be or feel that you are called to be. So I'm going to go way back. I'm going to go way back to first grade because I was elected first grade class president. This is Mac Murray's class at Westmere Elementary School. Now you have to wonder, what were the responsibilities of class president in first grade? I don't know. Snack time monitor, have no idea. I ran again for student body president in 8th grade successfully, then again in 12th grade. I was always drawn to try to problem solve and figure out how do you make life better even in the context of the school. I was a total geek. I read the newspaper from cover to cover starting in 5th grade. I was always intrigued by people in my community who had figured out how to make positive change, and I wanted to do that. But I didn't really know how I would ever have the opportunity to do that. So when I was a junior in high school, my history teacher asked me if I would serve in a mock convention. And I played the role of a woman named Geraldine Ferraro. And I have the picture on my phone. She was one of the first women to run on a major party ticket. She ran as vice president candidate to a man named Walter Mondale. And I was what we called then a tomboy. And I was very worried about having to wear a wig and pantyhose and a dress, and was so consumed with that I didn't have time to be nervous about the other stuff, which was giving the speech, answering the questions. And by the end of that, I felt so alive. I felt so on purpose. And I thought, yeah, that's what I want to do. The only problem was I did not have a role model. I didn't know any openly queer people in elected office, except for one man. His name was Harvey Milk, and he was a city councilor, I see many of you nodding, in San Francisco, and he'd been assassinated. And so as a kid getting that message, I thought, well, I don't know if I'm courageous enough to take that on. Look what happened to him. And I didn't think that I could be the kind of leader that I wanted to be, which was bringing my full self to a campaign at that time. So I put it away for a long time. I didn't run for office right out of college, nowhere close to it. And I also didn't have nobody in my family had ever run for office, like not even local office, not even school board. We didn't have money, we didn't have connections. And I remember when I first told my parents I wanted to run for office, they were like, why? Where did you get that idea? That's what my dad kept saying. Where did you get that idea? I was like, I don't know. It's something that is within me. And I won a leadership award when I was in high school, and the reporter came to talk to me and asked me, so you've won this leadership award, you clearly care about your community. What do you think you're going to do with your life? And I said, well, I want to teach, I want to write, and hopefully someday run for office. And I said, but no matter what I do, I want to make a difference in people's lives. Now, I know what I said, even though that was such a long time ago, because my mom saved every shred of everything that I ever did, and we still have that newspaper clipping. And she pulled it out when I ran for state senate, and she said, how did you know? How did you know that's what you wanted to do? Because I did write. I wrote a weekly op-ed column for almost 10 years, and I published a book, and I taught history, and I did eventually run for office. She said, how did you know that? I said, well, it was always that voice inside me. And I bring that up because you're right around that age, the students here, when I knew that. So you may also know what it is that you want to do. You really might. And my message is, listen to that voice and surround yourself with people who believe in you, who give you the confidence to continue on to make that dream a reality. So as I said, I put it away, this idea of what I wanted to do for a long time. And it really wasn't until I was in my 40s when I came home from work one day and I was very frustrated with our local representation in the state Senate. And my wife said to me, so you've always wanted to run for office. I don't understand why you don't run. And I said, well, it's a bad time. Like, we had 2 little kids then. One was in preschool, one was in kindergarten. And I said, I think it's passed me by. I don't think I'll have an opportunity to do that. As I said, I was in my early 40s. And she laughed at me. She said, honey, it's always going to be a bad time. There's never a good time to run for office. It's always terrifying. There are always challenges and hurdles. And she said, and I just want to let you know, our kids are always going to be our kids. And it's not like there's going to be this time when they're not going to need you. They're always going to need you. But we're going to figure it out together. So she really, really encouraged me. And I was grateful now. Like, when I look back, I'm so grateful I didn't run for office right out of college, because there had to be experiences that I had that helped make me the leader that I am today. And I'm going to take you through 3 of those experiences. Now, each day, every day, we have experiences and interactions and conversations that shape who we are. And all of those contribute to who we become, if we are open to the meaning that we get from them. So I could talk about a lot of different interactions. I'm just going to talk about 3. One was going to work at an organization in central Vermont called the Farm and Wilderness Foundation. And it's a group of Quaker camps. And I am not Quaker. But I was so intrigued by the stories that my friends told me about this place. And I thought, well, I had worked at camps for years. And I thought, well, I'm going to check it out. What is it about this place that moves people? And what I found out is that it was rooted in this idea that every person has a light within them. And by light, I mean inherent dignity, worthiness, and that it's our job as leaders, whether we're in our communities or in our schools, or for me in Congress, it's my responsibility to try to find that light and that basic inherent dignity in everyone I meet. And I ended up working there for years. I went on to direct one of the camps. I met my wife there. My daughter now goes there. It's been a huge part of my life. And that reference of seeing the light in everybody is actually a frame that I use in Congress all the time. What you tend to see on the news and on social media is about a horrible cesspool of people screaming at each other and dehumanizing each other. And I will tell you, there is a fair amount of that. There is. But I've been absolutely determined not to become that. And part of it goes back to this experience I had in trying to find the light in everyone. Now, it's easy to find the light in the people who we agree with. It's much more difficult to find the light in the people with whom we disagree. But it's more important, actually. And throughout my career, I have had to call people or talk to people who were so angry at me, furious, rude, that I have had to sit with them and think to myself, why are they feeling this pain? Why are they so angry in this moment? And how can I, in listening deeply, try to figure out collectively a path forward? I will tell you, almost every single time that I have done that, even with people who came in so hot and so furious, when I have taken the time to listen, almost every time they've said, thank you. Thank you for calling. Thank you for hearing me out. And I didn't switch my opinion. I didn't tell them what they necessarily wanted to hear, that I was going to vote a different way. But they felt heard. Because we all want to be heard. We all want to feel like somebody is valuing us in our humanity. And I think that we as leaders have to be really aware of, it's not just the decisions that are important, it's not just the votes that I take, either in committee or on the floor of the House of Representatives, it's how I do my work, it's how I show up. It matters. It absolutely matters. And I try every day to treat my colleagues as if they each have inherent dignity and self-worth. I don't always get it right, but I try. That is a guiding light for me. The second experience that I needed to have was learning about the researcher Brene Brown, Dr. Brene Brown. I see some thumbs up, people who have heard of her. Dr. Brene Brown is a researcher on shame and vulnerability and connected with. She teaches at the University of Houston. And through her years of research, she found that there's only one true way to have connection with others. You have to be willing to be vulnerable yourself. You have to be willing to show people who you are so that they know sort of the core of your being. And you have to be willing to do that even though you don't know if they're going to like you, respect you, or understand you. And that takes a lot of bravery. It takes a lot of courage. So I have found that often people like us, not just despite our faults, they often like us because of them, because they know that they also are not perfect. And they don't want that expected of them. Now, it's a fairly simple path to show vulnerability and genuineness, but it's not easy. If it were easy, we wouldn't have an entire social media network, across the globe that runs often on fury and indignation. It is much easier for us to point out other people's flaws and faults than for us to own our own. And there is so much pain that is tucked in that. Good leaders don't ignore their fears, don't ignore their vulnerability. Good leaders are willing to show their constituents that they don't know all the answers, that they sometimes screw up, that sometimes they take a vote that actually they regret. And I think it's a disservice sometimes when we spend so much time being angry about a public official who has a change of heart. And I'm not talking about folks who are in the work for ego, and that's a whole separate thing that we'll talk about. I'm talking about people who genuinely learn more about a topic and realize that they've made a mistake. We should not demonize people for having the courage and the willingness to admit error. And what I have found time and time again is that when I am willing to do that, people respect me more, not less. Now, early in my career, I was in my first term in the State House in Vermont, and a reporter had interviewed me about a particular bill. And I could see him sort of hanging around afterwards. He had something else that he wanted to say to me off the record. And so I said, well, what's on your mind? And he said, he said, I worry about you sometimes, which I know was meant in a friendly way, but it felt very condescending at the time that this reporter was worried about me as a grown woman who was doing my job. But I said, so tell me why. Why are you worried about me? And he said, well, I see that you bring your heart to your work. And he said, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to see you light up a room, you are able to get stuff done. He said, but I worry because politics can eat you alive. And I'm afraid that you are going to become a different person, or you're going to have to leave elected office. And I did something in that moment that surprised him, which is I just laughed. I said, you don't have to worry about that because I actually know exactly who I am. I know exactly who I am and why I'm doing this work. And so that's not going to happen. And it's funny because that was, 10 years ago. And every time I see him, he always sort of chuckles and says, I was wrong about that. Like, you're still the same person. I get asked a lot from young people, what is the most important thing I need to do or I need to know if I want to run for office or take a leadership role? The most important thing is you have to do the work to know yourself. Because if you don't do that work, you are going to blow in the wind like a tree. You gotta know what's at your core, what are your values, what's your why? Why do you want to do the work? So, we often talk about values as actions that we take. I am a vegan, or I am trying to have, the lowest, smallest carbon footprint that I can. And those are all worthy endeavors, but those are not the values that I am talking about here. I am talking about those things in your life that give your life purpose and meaning, those core values. They are a way of being in the world. And my core list of values that I think about a lot include these things: laughter, friendship, kindness, search for knowledge, empathy, hard work, big ideas, having far-reaching conversations with people, and developing a strong sense of connection to others. These are the things that move me and fulfill me and guide me in my work. So right now, whether you're watching on the live stream or whether you're here with me, I want you to take a few moments right now in quiet. And I want you to think about one or two things that you think guide you each day. What are those core values for you? Is it generosity? Is it patience? Is it organizing? Do you have a value of hard work, either for yourself or others? Is your value to be the one in the group who is listening deeply to others? So I'm going to stop talking for a few moments. I want you to have something in mind. So hopefully you've got something. And this is something I hope that you'll think about long after this talk. So these are questions I want you to ask yourself as you reflect on that value. How am I honoring this value? How am I living this value that I have just now acknowledged is so important to me? And then this is the one that I think brings it home. What have I done today to demonstrate that that is a value that is important to me? I say today because leadership, it's not an outfit that we try on. Who we are is how we lead. How we show up in the world is how we lead. The spirit of our work matters. Our daily interactions matter. It can't be an afterthought. It has to be completely part of how we show up each day. And our best leadership absolutely comes from within. So, as a daily practice, one of the things that I do is I try to see around me the good work in others. And when I see it, whether it's somebody on my staff or someone in my community, or someone in the Capitol building who just cleaned up a huge mess from a group of people that came through. I take the time to acknowledge the good work directly to them, and then make sure I tell other people about it. We all want to be seen. We all want to be acknowledged for having inherent dignity. Not because we want credit, not because we want our contributions to be noticed all the time, but because we want people to know that we matter. So when you are able to reflect that back to other people, you are giving them such an incredible gift. So those are 3 things that I had to figure out before I ever ran for office. So look, now I am a member of Congress. I try to pass progressive legislation on housing, on reproductive rights, on protecting the queer and trans community, on making sure everybody has an opportunity to have safe, secure housing, all of these things. But sometimes you can't pass your bill. I always say Congress is like a big math problem. If you don't have the right people in the seats to vote the way that you need them to vote, then you're not going to be able to pass policy. But that doesn't mean that you can't have an impact. So I am thinking so deeply right now, in this moment, even before we had that shocking result on Tuesday night, months before that, I was very focused on how do we come out of this moment as a nation. And I'm very concerned about the struggle for connectedness and what I see as an epidemic of loneliness in this country. So we're having such an urgent problem with loneliness that our own Surgeon General, U.S. Surgeon General, has declared it a public health emergency. And I know he's absolutely right. It is affecting our personal, emotional health, physical health, our communities, our politics, the way we treat each other. The rampant disconnection that Americans are feeling from each other is fueling anger and distrust in each other and in politics and in democracy. We always have had policy disagreements. Sometimes, I taught history, sometimes they've been really nasty. It's not the only time that we've had stark policy disagreements, but I would venture to say that we have never seen this level of hatred and fear-mongering and vitriol and dehumanizing of each other, certainly not in modern history. So I want you to know the science of all of this, the science of connectedness, is very clear and compelling. People who lead unhealthy lifestyles, drink too much, smoke too much, don't exercise enough, but have stronger social ties, stronger community bonds, they live longer than people who lead healthy lives but do not have social connection. That's how important it is. It's like as important as the air we breathe. So I think we have an opportunity right now in this moment to take action against this crisis of loneliness that is not just impacting, as I said, physical health, emotional health, but also our ability to care for each other, to get work done in the democracy. And the question I have, and what guides me in my work, how do we do that work? How do we get back to a sense of calm and connection? How do we feel better about ourselves so that then we can do the work of caring for others? And I know for many folks in Vermont, the natural world is a huge part of that. And being here on this campus, I can tell that that is a value here at Titans Rock. It's a beautiful campus. There are many opportunities to get out into the natural world. Now, I am not a religious person, but I am deeply spiritual. And I find my spirituality in the outside world. It's why I go outside every day in DC, even if I have a lot of work. I go out, I listen to the birds, I listen to the squirrels. I have even been known to take off these sparkly heels and walk barefoot on the lawn in front of the Capitol because I want to ground myself in the natural world. We know, again, the science is clear. It makes us calmer. It helps us fight depression and anxiety. When I am in a very contentious meeting in the Judiciary Committee with people saying horrible things about my community, as soon as we have a break, I go outside and I sit quietly and I think to myself, I am part of something larger than myself. That's how I get through those hard days. So I want to tell you about a researcher who has really transformed the way I think about my work. His name is Dr. Keltner, and he teaches at the University of California. And he studies a whole host of things, including power. So actually I want to give a big shout out to the advisor for the Queer Leadership Project, who I see is taking notes back here. The Power Paradox is an excellent book that you should check out. But he also has another book about awe and what happens when we experience awe. So when we experience a sense of awe, we have what he says, a sense of perceived vastness. Our sense that we are connected to something larger than ourselves. And we have to integrate that information. We have to make it work within our minds and in our souls, I would argue. And we have those moments of perceived vastness when we're looking at the trees of Yosemite or at the Grand Canyon, or honestly, if you're at a Taylor Swift concert and you're singing all of the lyrics together and you all know it and everyone's waving the thing, that also is an experience of awe. You experience it when you see a gorgeous sunset and it stops you in your tracks. And in that instance, you feel like I am connected to something larger than myself. But the most intriguing thing to me about what brings us that sense of awe is that when we watch people striving beyond what they think is possible, when we see people working hard on behalf of other people, that is also something that elicits a sense of awe in us. And what awe does to us is it makes us more in touch with our humility. It makes us better listeners. It makes us more willing to admit that maybe we don't know all the answers. In a very, simple way, I believe my experiences of that, it makes me a better person, and therefore, by extension, a better leader. And Dr. Keltner has a beautiful expression for that when you see somebody doing such hard work on behalf of other people. He calls it moral beauty. And I can tell you, on this campaign, on the Harris Walls campaign, we saw a lot of moral beauty, a lot of it. I was down in Pennsylvania last week. I was door knocking, canvassing with all of these Puerto Rican women who were part of a union in New York who took an early morning bus ride down to Pennsylvania to canvass on behalf of other people. I left there, again, feeling that sense of awe and humility. So how do we move beyond this moment? Knowing that we need to find more opportunities for people to experience that, to be open to that, to not be demonizing each other, as I talked about on social media, to not always come from a place of rage and and denigration. How do we do that? It starts with seeing the inherent dignity in every person. There's another person I want to mention here. Her name's Donna Hicks. She researches on dignity. Now, this is not somebody who is just an academic who researches dignity from afar. She was in every possible hot spot that you could imagine across the globe, trying to get to conflict resolution among warring parties. She has been in it. And she said the one thing that had to be present in order to come to any sense that we could move forward in a conflict, the one thing that needed to be present is that each side needed to acknowledge that everyone on the other side had inherent dignity and self-worth. Nothing could happen without a sense of acknowledgement of the inherent dignity of the people on the other side. That's where we are. That's where we are right now. That's where we are in this country right now. But we have the model. We have the model to do that. So for me, in Congress, the work always starts there. So I'm an elected leader. I serve in one of the most powerful legislative bodies in the world. But I am not the only one who has the ability to exercise this kind of leadership. You all have the power too. Within your families, within your communities, within your friends group, within your spheres of influence. This is not stuff that only matters for people who run on the ballot, because so much leadership actually bubbles up from the folks on the ground. So, I believe that the best leadership flows from courage and kindness, from seeing the light in everyone. And I know, because I work with young people all the time, I know that you have everything that you need right now to be the kind of leader that you want to be. So I need you to get curious about yourself. Figure out your core values. Figure out your why. Then grow confident in that belief of what it is your purpose is by surrounding yourself with people who believe in you. If you have an idea of what you want to do and the people around you are telling you you can't do it, or it's not a good idea, or you're not the right person, I'm going to ask you to seek out those people who can help guide you and mentor you and simply lift you up. You can create the community that you need around you to be a successful leader. I think we spend a lot of time propping up leaders who are social media darlings, who have the soundbite, who go viral. And we forget that the best leaders are the people who are trying desperately to bring us all back into community with each other. So the overarching work of my life, regardless of what bills I'm able to pass, which is of course incredibly important, but the overarching mission for me is to make us all better people, and I'm starting with myself. Thank you. Oh, I was told the wrong chair. Oh, good. It's a good side, too.
You can have your mic and Carla. Well, thank you so much, Becca, if I may, for this. We're very first name here, so We have a little bit of time for question and answer. We do need to be out by 6 because we also have a very exciting opening night here in the theater building for Much Ado About, parentheses, Nothing, a re-envisioning of Shakespeare's play. But we do have some time, so I'm going to have Carla kind of field the questions, maybe do some repeating. Speak loudly if you can, and this is a chance to ask some questions.
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Okay.
Skyward.
So I know over the past few days, Dr. Stevens and I have been talking about this idea, but I really believe that education is one of the biggest powers and tools that we have right now. And I'm sure that you, as someone who has studied education and history especially, can agree with that on some lines. And I myself have been working as a middle school teacher for the past...
Woohoo! Yes, middle school teachers.
I think it's great, John. You should try it. And I love those kids so much. And so I'm wondering, for you, what's the biggest lesson that your students have taught you? What is the biggest thing that you've taken away from them?
So for our people in the Zoomosphere, a student has asked Representative Balint what she's learned from her students.
I've learned so much from my students, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. But I think the biggest one is that we cannot be afraid to fail, because it holds us back. When we are afraid to fail, then we are not able to fully realize our creativity and our potential. And I tried a lot of interesting things when I was a teacher. We did a lot of theater in my class. I wrote musical parodies for every unit that we finished, and sometimes we even choreographed them. And sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. And sometimes I wrote a dud. Sometimes, they would look at me like, what are we doing? And yet we together laughed through it. And I think having that experience has made me much more fearless in my work as a legislator, that I don't have that fear that if I speak on the House floor or if I speak in committee, that if I mess up and it gets picked up on C-SPAN, that's going to be the end of my career, right? I think they have taught me not to collapse those moments of embarrassment, because I'm sure you've had them also with middle school students. I always say being a middle school teacher was the perfect preparation for Congress. Perfect. In so many ways. You can understand the double entendre there, yes. But I'm so glad that you're doing that. I'm so glad. You understand your community in such a different way when you have taught in schools in your community. You understand the struggles of students and their parents in a different way, and you bring those stories with you to the work of being a leader. So, great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you briefly touched on this earlier, but as an openly LGBTQ member of Congress, you regularly have to deal with people who perhaps either to your face or in political rallies on the social media feeds advocate against your existence.
Yes.
How do you work with people or really humanize people who regularly dehumanize yourself?
Yeah, this is the struggle. This is the struggle. I contain multitudes, just as you contain multitudes. I am a queer woman. I am also a very short woman. I am a Vermonter who rides a motorcycle and chops wood. I am many things. But to some of those people, I am only a gay American, and they're going to denigrate me and dehumanize me. What I figured out from being in Congress is that there are people who believe the hatred. There are people who tolerate the hatred for political gains. And there are people who are disgusted by it, and by people I mean Republicans who are disgusted by it and cannot find the political courage to stand up to it. And I've asked them, I said, you know me, you know my family, You say that you are supportive of LGBTQ rights, and yet you vote against my existence, as you say, on the floor of the House. And they say, you know, I'm not homophobic. They said, I just don't want to be targeted on Twitter. And I always say to them, you think I do? There's a disconnect here. And so it's hard. I'm not going to tell you it's easy. It's hard. But I'm able to do it partly because in those moments when they are falling short, I know there have been moments when I have fallen short. I know that. Not necessarily for queer and trans people, but perhaps for, in another moment when I should have been more outspoken about something. That I cannot hold them to perfection when I also am not perfect. So I do these, I don't want to say it's a mind game, it's a practice. And it goes like this. Just like me, that person is flawed. Just like me, that person has a family at home. Just like me, they're feeling insecure. So that helps me in some moments. And in other moments, I know that I have to be more fearless in calling out the behavior, even for those people who are afraid to be a target. And I made a commitment to a member of the press the other day who was interviewing me. She's like, what are you going to do different, given the results of the election, given coming into Congress in this way? And I said, I am still going to be loving and understanding and finding the light, but also being much more directed in my pointing out to people that they are not being their best selves. And that doesn't have to happen on Instagram, and that doesn't have to happen on Twitter. And in fact, when you do it there, nothing actually good comes from it. It's about talking to those people in the hallway and saying, when you voted that way, you hurt me, and you hurt my family, and you know me. But it's hard. I won't lie. It's hard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
One more.
So I'll try and make this quick because I know we have to go in a minute. But in the past, how long? 48 hours. God, incredibly long 48 hours since the election. Mental health hotlines that have been geared at queer and trans youth have reported up to a 200% increase in their calls from queer youth in crisis. So what, I guess, if you had to have any closing words of maybe reassurance or affirmation or anything to queer kids in these spaces who are just really scared right now, what would you say?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. The news never tells the whole story. It never does. And there is so much nuance and complexity in the kinds of conversations that are happening right now within Congress. And there is an industry that drives very public conflict. Okay? It just is. It's just the way that it is. And so I always feel like news today is not fit for human consumption because it makes us so afraid and fearful. And yes, there are things in Project 2025, there are things that Trump and Vance have said that, of course, would give us pause and make us fearful. But what you miss is that there are so many people in Congress who are going to be the firewall against that. And I'm thinking of, I don't know if you know the news, we're going to have the very first trans member of Congress, Sarah McBride. She's a friend of mine. She's going to be terrific. She's a great legislator. And, as soon as we get there together, we're going to be having those conversations of how do we do the work here? How do we message to youth across this country that we're here for you? And I also want to reassure you that the leadership team within the Democratic caucus are incredibly supportive of the queer and trans community. And Catherine Clark, who is one of your House members here in Massachusetts, She's in the leadership team, and she has a trans child, so this is incredibly important to her. So if you can, and I can't believe I'm saying this because I am a political geek, detox from the news. Really, for your mental health, take a break. I'm taking a break. I'm looking at it as at a need-to-know basis right now because there's incredibly positive work that's happening, and you're not going to see that because honestly, it doesn't get the eyeballs, and it's unfortunate that that's where we're at. I was having a conversation this morning with some Vermonters who were posting, who were very afraid, and I reached out to them and I said, I know, I hear you. You have to know there are those of us who are not going to let the hatred and the fear-mongering take root permanently in this country. We're just not. And we do need to continue to support mental health hotlines, supports in schools. That is a huge part of the work that I have been doing in Congress in the last 2 years is on the mental health crisis. So consider me a partner in that. And I have members of my staff who are part of the community, and they're younger people, and they are constantly letting me know what I need to be saying and where I need to be saying it so that I can reassure people. Thank you for the question. Are we going to dinner?
We're going to dinner. So I would like to ask for another round of applause.
Thank you.
And I'd just like to say, I know that when things are tough, sometimes you need to go see your teacher. We don't always have the perfect answers, but they're there to help. And I'm really just excited that we all got to have Representative Becca Balint as the teacher who we got to come see today on what we knew was going to be a complicated day. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank Carla Stevens for her work on this. Thank our wonderful team here in the Daniel Arts Center. And thanks to all of you for joining, whether here in person or out in the virtual world. Thanks for being part of our community. Good night.